everyone, and welcome to today's webinar hosted by Aunt Minnie. We appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to join us today. Today marks a very big milestone as Subtle Medical officially launches the SubtleELIGN Suite, an industry-first package of solutions designed to set new benchmarks in MRI speed, image quality, and workflow automation. We're thrilled to have a few AI experts and key customers here to help present this information to you. First, I'm Anna Minihart. I'm the head of global marketing here at Subtle Medical. First, I'll introduce Dr. Lawrence Tannenbaum, neuroradiologist and former VP and Chief Technology Officer. Hi, Dr. Tannenbaum.
How you doing?
Doing well. Next, we have Dr. Blake Johnson, National Medical Director at Reyes Radiology, who has so kindly agreed to participate even while on his vacation. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Johnson.
Appreciate the invitation, Anna. Good morning, everybody.
And last but never the least, Dr. Catherine Keller joining us, President of Lake Medical Imaging, also joining us from Florida. Nice to see you, Dr. Keller.
Hi, thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. We are privileged to have you all. So thank you for being here. First, I'm just going to walk through a brief agenda so you know what to expect. I'll start with a brief introduction to Subtle Medical, followed by Dr. Tannenbaum, who will do a deep dive and clinical image review of the SubtleELIGN solutions. And then Dr. Johnson and Dr. Keller will share their individual case studies on the impact they're seeing with Subtle solutions at their both smaller private practice and a larger 130 plus site enterprise practice. And then we'll end with a live Q&A. So be sure to drop your questions in the Q&A box or in the chat as we go along. Before we get started, let's just talk a little bit about how we got here. Since 2018, we've really been at the forefront of AI-powered image enhancement. Subtle Medical has basically helped define this new category in medical imaging. To date, we have 9 FDA clearances, and we've published over 25 peer-reviewed publications, many with the support of the speakers on our program today. We've secured over 50 million in funding, but we've also received 6 million in just highly competitive SBIR grants alone to fuel our R&D pipeline and drive the expansion of our existing technologies because of the immense social impact that they have. Our global footprint is approaching 1,000 scanners worldwide, which translates into millions of dollars saved, millions of hours saved, and millions of patients positively impacted. We've also built strategic partnerships with some of the biggest players in the industry, as you can see here. For example, Bracco, Bayer, who are leveraging Subtle's proprietary technology to develop solutions for higher quality and ultra low dose contrast enhanced MRI, and also Telix Pharmaceuticals, who now distributes Subtle PET for faster and higher quality PET imaging. That's just to name a few. Now, for what we're launching today, I just want to show this because you're going to hear a few product names thrown around. So we just want to make this very clear that SubtleELIGN is a package of 3 solutions. They are all FDA cleared and sold as one unit in the US. We just received CE mark for SubtleHD specifically. So internationally, we'll begin the rollout with SubtleHD with the other products to follow. And our speakers here today will go through these individually. Just to get ahead of a few common questions we often receive, all of Subtle Medical's solutions are scanner neutral. They work with any OEM make or model, and they're compatible with most field strengths and contrast types, ensuring adaptability and scalability across diverse fleets. A key advancement from SubtleMR to SubtleHD is that SubtleHD now supports all anatomies, including cardiac imaging, leveraging the latest AI models for state-of-the-art performance, which today's speakers will showcase. And as always, to provide the best support for our customer success and account managers are all trained MRI techs who come on site with the expertise to ensure a seamless implementation and a successful implementation for our customers. So finally, why we do what we do, why are we so driven to innovate at a rapid pace, launching new products every year or two, is really how it benefits every stakeholder in radiology, from the patients who benefit from a better patient experience and shorter scan times, shorter wait times, to imaging facilities who can reduce backlogs and increase their revenue on existing resources, to the techs and radiologists who now with superior image quality have more confidence in clinical decision making and more time to spend on patient care. That's why Subtle Medical does what we do. And it's truly a win-win across the board. But there's nobody better to talk about that than the folks who live and breathe it every day. So with that being said, I will hand it off to our first speaker, Dr. Lawrence Tannenbaum. Dr. T, the floor is yours.
So just to give everybody the chance to reset, I think you can see that I've had to, I've just come directly off the slopes. Those double black diamonds are really very difficult for me to navigate, but I'll try to make do here on this presentation. It's great to be here, and let's go ahead and get started. So I think the theme of today's presentation is about product, but there we go. Going beyond the product, which we'll discuss today, it's really important to consider when you're choosing a partner in any space, in any area of advanced imaging, and particularly a space like the one we're in today, to consider the pedigree of the organization, the people that your organization in IT, your doctors, your administrators have to deal with in working with that company, as well as the pipeline of products in the individual company's portfolio. Because again, they want to make sure that after all the effort you put in, that it will come down to product that is always state of the art and best in class across the board. So, with that in mind, we're going to talk about product today, which is not something that I do very often, but I think today it really is relevant to talk about what is in this SubtleELIGN package. And we'll start with the SubtleALIGN package. And, being an active clinical imager, doing a lot of surveillance examinations, it's really important that the images are pretty standardized and consistent between visits. This undoubtedly affects diagnosis, but also affects our ability to read in an efficient fashion. You can see the difference between what you see on the top row here, where the patient is a little bit oddly positioned, and a lot more imaging and dementia going on, and patients aren't that cooperative in that population. And you can see once the SubtleALIGN has kicked in and re-standardized the images, we get images that are much easier to read and much more consistent between visits. You can see from this particular example, on 2 different visits, the patient's head is in different position, again, complicating the evaluation, making it a longer process. And you see how after realignment, things are very consistent, and that really does facilitate diagnosis. On this example, across 3 time points, again, 3 different positions, but a very consistent result here on the bottom of your screen, which I think is extremely cool. Now, why this matters? Because we're doing a lot more surveillance. Patients on disease-modifying therapies in multiple sclerosis, this patient has 20 or so lesions. If the positioning of the slices isn't standardized, and it never would be really, it takes much longer, and you can easily make mistakes. With standardization of positioning, you get a much more consistent result. And that also applies to things like brain tumors as well. Minor changes in brain tumor may not be evident if you don't have almost perfect positioning between visits, but this kind of thing can really help. So not a huge deal, but something that is quality and it is efficiency, but in a more stealthy way. The next piece is to talk about SubtleHD. And I've been involved in this business for a long time. I've been an MR geek since the dawn of time. I've had more experience with OEM solutions and solutions on the market than virtually anyone. And I'm old enough to call in this old TV commercial. Let's just say that SubtleHD is not your dad's DLR. It's a lot further advanced than anything we had years ago, and I think it's pretty impressive. Now, we know what DLR really does. It just gives you denoising, and it gives you really powerful denoising, which again is where you get your acceleration from in some respect, but it does it while preserving sharpness, preserving spatial resolution, boosting contrast resolution, and maintaining the integrity of our images in a quantitative fashion. You can easily see how we can take a noisy image, and by the way, radiologists love that grain on that image, but that grain is nothing but noise. Take that noisy image and clean it up while still maintaining the sharpness, which I think is really impressive. So SubtleMR, which we're all familiar with, was the initial product in this space. It's a universally capable DICOM-based tool that does all types of imaging sequences, 2D, 3D, modified radial case-based trajectories, all of them, and it's applicable to both new systems as well as legacy systems, and in many cases can supplement what the OEMs don't provide. Here you see a really nice example off a GE scanner. You see that from the Propeller proprietary name. The image on the left is the standard of care scan at a longer scan time than the image that has been enhanced by the basic SubtleMR and done at a shorter scan time. Now, at this point, I think it's pretty fair to say that deep learning reconstruction is an evolving standard of care. You heard about a number of publications. A couple of these are mine with my colleague, Dr. Bash, as you can see here. One of them was a really important landmark paper that was actually recognized by the folks at Mini for Image of the Year. And when they called this Image of the Year, we were very proud, but we were more proud about the fact that the images, when they're done with the subtle deep learning reconstruction, compared against the clinical standard of care, we ended up with the same clinical classification of disease and extraordinary inter-reader correlations and no changes in the numbers, yet still gave us better image quality. Now, again, when you start thinking about how am I going to integrate this essentially off-premises solution, this cloud-based solution in my day-to-day practice, it's important to know that it's going to be reliable. RadNet scanning right now is up to 49,000 exams per month, and in all the years that I supervised this process, there was never a disruption, and that's an awful lot of volume, and it adds an awful lot of assurance. Now, again, we're here to talk about SubtleHD, which is essentially the evolution of the original SubtleMR program. It's completely new. It's trained on many more high-resolution data sets. But most importantly, for a seat-of-the-pants AI guy like me, it's trained on the new style of high-resolution data people are doing with the OEM solutions, which is a much higher resolution point. It's a much higher quality point. And this manifests in the algorithm's product, as you'll see. And as you can see, it really does put up some substantial time savings. This is a very respectable image with SubtleMR. This is the same image reprocessed with SubtleHD. And I think it's easy to see that it's a faster scan. And you can't see that it's faster, but you can clearly see that it's a sharper scan. Here you see SubtleMR on the left, and here you see SubtleHD on the right. I don't think there's any question that this represents an advance over what was considered the standard of care before. Here you can see SubtleMR on the left, SubtleHD on the right, a fast to press scan, ordinarily very low in SNR, really nice, it's sharp, and it has really great noise characteristics. As you can see here, you can see the standard of care image on the left and the accelerated image processed with SubtleHD, clearly representing a different standard on the right-hand side. Here you see another example from a GE HD XD, a legacy 3T. The image with SubtleMR with 3 minutes and 25 seconds was quite respectable, but look what SubtleHD can do, clearly sharper, better signal to noise, and done in about a third of the time. Now, these are actually RadNet numbers. We're looking at a legacy machine here. So, the overall scan times really reflect the state of the machine. On the other hand, you can see SubtleMR took it down to about 15 minutes, a 21% savings, but SubtleHD gave you a new standard of care at even a faster scan time. Here you see, again, an image which I believe says standard of care on the left, 6 minutes 45. And if you look at the SubtleHD image on the right-hand side, you can see a better quality, clearly better sharpness, even a better definition of the transitional zone here, which is really important clinically for your PIRATES criteria and does it at a shorter amount of scan time. Here again, a very similar example, standard of care on the left at 6:44. The new standard of care as we implement a SubtleHD down to about 5 minutes with better quality. Here again, you can see the same thing on this axial T1 post-contrast image. You can see here they're clearly aiming at a higher standard of care, a sharper image, yet still maintaining the SNR of the lower resolution image. And I think it's pretty impressive. It does it at a faster scan time. Here you can see the comparison against standard of care against the SubtleHD on the right-hand side. Okay, so you can see that is a standard of care image at 242 on the left, and on the right-hand side we see the clearly sharper SubtleHD image in just about half the time. Here you can see a PD fast out at the hip. You can see the conventional image on the left, really respectable for a very difficult exam. The SubtleHD image, better SNR, better sharpness, and does it 75% faster. I think that's really important. Now the acceleration really comes from the scanner. What the algorithm does is compensate for the SNR, but it also does something, SNR loss, but it also does something that is more remarkable, which is really gives you a sharper image. Here you see some image off a Philips machine, legacy machine, really respectable image quality. Same data, you can see the resolution is boosted. So yeah, we accelerate as fast as the scanner will let us go. We get low SNR as you would expect, but we get shorter scan times. The algorithm cleans up the SNR, but also increases the sharpness and appeal and value of the image. I think it's really impressive. Here again is another standard images from the OEM and what SubtleHD does to those images, clearly sharper and better in SNR. I think that's pretty cool. Here again, look at this Siemens magnet. We've gone to a compressed sense factor of 5, giving this a lot of acceleration. You can actually see the noise in the central aspect of the image. SubtleHD not only denoises, but look at that boost in sharpness. And look at what you get in terms of greater visualization of the smaller vessels in the distal MCA territory, clearly representing an advance. Here again, an abdominal image, that's the standard of care image on the left with the OEM DL Recon built into this modern machine. You can see it's cleaner, but I think it doesn't add anything over the SubtleHD and may actually may actually slightly be inferior to the SubtleHD application. So for the next few slides, let's take a look and see how well SubtleHD compares to what the OEMs are putting out. Here's the OEM standard Recon on the left. Everybody with a GU scanner will recognize that. This is, by the way, is an absolutely astonishing version of that image with the same data. I'm pretty jaded. This kind of blew me away. Here's the DL Recon from the vendor. Again, really nice looking image. I think the SubtleHD image, blows it away. And as a matter of fact, this is from the vendor off the machine. These are reconstruction artifacts that this particular vendor happens to suffer from. Notice how it doesn't show up on the SubtleHD image. This is a massive advance for this particular scanner. Here you see an accelerated image from a scanner. Get the noise in it. It should, because you've gone too fast for what a standard reconstruction can do. Here, adding on the OEM DLR really restores it to a spectacular quality. Again, here you see the accelerated image and what SubtleHD produces on this case. Again, really a big boost in quality. When you put them both together, I think it's hard to say that the SubtleHD is not the superior of the two. And if you zoom in on details, you really can see it. Look at the sharpness, the gray white differentiation, the beautiful delineation of the cortex. And notice how that compares to what is coming off the vendor's machine with this state-of-the-art deep learning reconstruction. Again, deep learning is a remarkable thing. Working at DICOM space gives you some advantages, and I think you're seeing it right here. Again, OEM standard of care, SubtleHD, clearly better. Okay, OEM DLR, SubtleHD, it's really hard to say which one you prefer. I mean, they're really both superb. And certainly the SubtleHD doesn't suffer by comparison. Standard on the left, SubtleHD on the right. Beautiful images. And comparing really well, if not slightly better than what the OEM is putting out. I think that's pretty impressive stuff. OEM standard of care, SubtleHD on the right. OEM DLR, SubtleHD on the right. I don't want to keep repeating myself. OEM DLR on the left, SubtleHD on the right. Pretty good, maybe even better. I mean, look at the sharpness of those stress lines in the bone. Again, OEM standard of care, little noisy in this particular scan. Look at how nicely SubtleHD cleans that up, improves the sharpness a bit, comparing very well against the DLR. I think that's pretty impressive. Now, part of what you like to do with these studies is see if you can elevate your machine, your new machines to match your old machines to match your new machines. But you can also look at it to make it at 1.5 emulate the performance of a 3T. And I thought it would be fun to show these cases. You got SubtleHD on the left at 1.5, and you have the manufacturer standard of care at 3T. Nice sagittal T1 spine, sagittal T2 spine. Hard to argue that the SubtleHD doesn't have the same SNR and delivers better sharpness. I think it's hard to argue that. 1.5 on the left with SubtleHD, 3T on the right. Compares very well, and I think a sharper image. SubtleHD on the left, 1.5, Subtle3T on the right. Faster scan, at least as sharp, better SNR. I think it's pretty impressive. Again, 1.5 on the left with HD, standard of care on the right. A little longer on the 1.5 T scanner in this example, but really spectacular quality. Again, same thing you see here, 1.5 on the left, comparing very well against the 3T on the right. All right, last piece, which is frankly the most revolutionary piece, and that is the ability to do synthetic imaging take the information in existing sequences and create something new that you can use, and you can and giving you information that will help you either make a diagnosis or avoid doing a direct scan. This is again part of the SubtleALIGN package. You've heard that it's FDA cleared, and it really is one of those things that was behind getting that SPR grants, those types of SPR grants into the Subtle pipeline. By the way, this is a real stir and this is a synthetic stir. I think it's a pretty impressive comparison. Imagine instead of doing the actual scan, you could take the existing contrast in the existing scan and synthesize that scan instead of actually taking the time to do the scan. Some really remarkable cases, patient with a compression fracture, scan T1, scan T2, scan stir, and that compares very well against the synthetic stir. And you'll notice in this case, the theme you'll see over and over. The images have better SNR and better sharpness. And it makes sense because they were derived from these high SNR, high sharpness T1 and T2. And whenever you do a stir, I'm an MR geek, so I'm really involved in this. Any techs on the call will understand. We tend to use lower resolution and longer scan times to make the image look okay, but you give up sharpness and you never really get there with SNR. Osteomyelitis and discitis, all the real scans, this is what the synthesized scan looks like in this case. Pretty remarkable, in my opinion. Now, Dr. Bash and I, along with some other collaborators, published this work in the AJNR in July of 2023. You can see here a trauma case with conventional stir and with synthetic stir. We essentially did a multi-center, multi-reader, multi-field strength trial comparing these techniques together. Here's a patient with a spine tumor, nicely seen on the real stir and the synthetic stir. Here are some examples with myelopathy, many times showing clearly better image quality. Patients with bone tumor, again, really respectable, really outstanding, rendering of the stir contrast from the existing sequences. Here's a case from a Siemens 1.5. You'll see another theme, really nice rendering of the compression fracture and the edema and the posterior aspect of the vertebral body. But notice how much better this image is rendered with less artifact and greater sharpness. Over across the board, we saw better SNR across the board. Real stir, synthetic stir. Okay, again, real stir, synthetic stir. And, we had less artifact across the board, but probably the most, underappreciated but incredibly clinically valuable benefit of synthetic stir over the genuinely scanned stir is that when you do stir, to get the images to look decent, you use a very low bandwidth to steal some extra SNR. Unfortunately, when you use a low bandwidth, you maximize the amount of susceptibility artifact you get. If you can actually harvest the SNR and the contrast from the high resolution, high SNR T1s and T2s that are done in a high bandwidth, you get the metal artifact behavior of a high bandwidth scan. So across the board, you will see less metal artifact on a synthetic stir than you see on a real stir. So I've already told you the images were better, clinically equivalent, which is very important, but actually better in terms of sharpness and signal to noise. So what you get from this is you get the ability to skip a real series and use a synthetic one. You can sometimes generate information that you wish you had, but you didn't have the time to scan. You're going to get the patient off the table better. Focusing on the patient experience is always important. And potentially, when you have synthetic imaging, you can actually avoid calling a patient back if a series fails. And here's a good example of that I think is the most clinically relevant on the product. You have a patient who moves on the long end of scan, stir scan, you can repeat that, but what's the definition of insanity? Repeating the same experiment and expecting a different result. You often get motion. It's wonderful to be able to create, not bring the patient back, not rescan the patient, but actually create a gorgeous looking synthetic version in a patient that couldn't hold still. Here's another example. First example had motion, second example had motion, third one shows you this beautiful image quality. So, looking at an old legacy 1.5, maybe a couple of years of being replaced, it took us about 14 minutes and 19 seconds at RadNet to get a lumbar spine scan on the average. Using SubtleMR brought that scan time down to about 10 minutes, but using SubtleSYNTH to avoid scanning the stir brought that scan time down to 7 minutes on an old legacy 1.5T system. That represents a substantial amount of time savings. 32% with SubtleMR alone. And again, how much time you save is based on the protocol and where you were. These are Tannenbaum scan times, if you excuse me. These are RadNet scan times, well known for efficiency to start with. and then you add this tool onto a very efficient system, and you still get 32% with subtle MR. And this is not subtle MRHD, this is MR data. And adding on the synth, you get potentially a 52% time savings. So we've covered a lot of these products. I'm probably running long, so I'll try to transition this off. But I think you can see the value here. I hope you share my enthusiasm for how these tools will make an enormous difference, and that choosing a partner with this type of a pipeline, I think is really one of the key considerations as we move forward. Thank you very much for your attention. I believe I have the opportunity now to hand the program off to my much older colleague, Dr. Blake Johnson. He's actually several years younger than I am, which is why he's smiling. And he's going to give us his next discussion, which I think we're all looking forward to, on maximizing efficiency in the large enterprise, the operational impact of going faster. Blake?
Thank you, Larry. So Larry just gave us an excellent overview of the technology that is now available using these tools. And I was asked to go over the what it has done for us practically in our enterprise at Reyes Radiology. And so I will give you a summary of as we implemented subtle MR in our enterprise, rolling it out over 21 magnets. What did that do to our bottom line? We took the time to analyze not only the time savings, but the actual cost impact and revenue impact for us by using these tools that Larry just outlined, specifically in this case, subtle MR, which is the precursor to SubtleHD. A little bit about our organization. It was founded in '81 as Center for Diagnostic Imaging in Minnesota. It was the first outpatient imaging center in Minnesota, and it has grown since through acquisitions and multiple transactions into over 140 centers. We're at about 145 centers, plus over 100 mobile scanners, which service hospital solutions, clinics, and healthcare organizations utilizing mobile MR, PET CT, and CT. So we have a large footprint in the United States. We're actually the provider for a number of the Winter Olympic sports teams that you can see there. It really has been fun to be part of an organization that has grown like we have. But we have unique challenges because we're outpatient in many of our fixed sites. And what that means is we don't have a captive patient audience that gets referred from either a healthcare enterprise or a hospital. We rely on patients and clinicians wanting to refer to us. So how we do our product goes out, that's our images, our reports, etc., is very important in order to survive in an outpatient imaging practice. So what was our goal in employing the tools that are available from Subtle, specifically Subtle MR, and we are rolling out the Elite package as well, which I'm very excited about. Well, one is we've got a number of scanners across the U.S. By extending their longevity of these legacy scanners, it's a serious improvement in our CapEx oversight by our professional team or management team, but also it allows those scanners before they are replaced to produce better images, which Larry just showed us. It also, by shortening the scan time, which Larry just outlined, we are increasing throughput, and I'll actually go over real numbers there, what that does in terms of maximizing revenue, optimizing our predictivity across our enterprise. And importantly, and it's not trivial, increasing patient satisfaction. As physicians, of course, we want our patients to be satisfied, comfortable, and pleased with the experience, but that too impacts the bottom line, which we'll look at. First of all, the scanner longevity and sustainability. When we look at a new unit, either because we have to replace a unit or when we have a saturated magnet in a given market, our model was always let's add another magnet, either in an existing center or opening up another center. That's massive CapEx. And if you are able to service more patients generate more revenue without that large capital outlay for a new magnet. You can delay it, maybe even avoid it if you have enough magnets in a given market, which we have several in the Twin Cities where I practice. It makes a big difference. Not just incrementally, like Larry showed us, getting more patients in per day, but now we're talking about these massive outlays of capital for a new system. We are a multi-vendor enterprise. So it was essential for us to have a vendor agnostic solution so we could use the same software across multiple scanners. And our implementation started, as I mentioned, with 21 centers or scanners in multiple states, so we could look at and analyze the impact it would have on our practice. So here's real numbers. When we deployed SubtleMR, these are taken off our scanners, the standard of care, which is the term we used for the standard image acquisition. How long were these scans taking? And after we deployed SubtleMR, what kind of savings did we get? Multiple scanners. Here's just a sample of 4 of the types of units that we have in our imaging centers, but you can see that all of them enjoyed massive savings in terms of imaging time, acquisition times, same type of numbers that you saw Larry present in terms of what this does. This is not trivial. It's not only better for patient comfort, but look what it does to throughput. You get those more scans per day out of each magnet, and you scale that, that makes a big difference. What kind of difference are we talking about? Well, in our case, it added about 3 additional slots per day. Now, not all of our scanners were at full capacity. So that's our problem to solve, is how do we get them to full capacity? But the scanners that were at capacity, we would see additional slots per day that were up to 3. Now, if we look across the 21 scanners we had that on, we deployed it where we had older scanners that needed some help, and they were full scanners. We didn't put it on our initial trial on those scanners that didn't. And a quick side note there, I would like to justify putting it on those other scanners because I like the image quality improvement that you saw Larry show us. It's easier to read those scans. We had a better product going out. So there's different levels that you can enjoy the benefits of this, but from a bottom line standpoint and getting your management team to okay the capital expenditure for doing these, the extra cost of these, which is incremental per scan, look what it does in terms of actual return on investment. So when your scanners are busy, this is the kind of numbers, and this is just from the first 21 scanners we deployed. Huge, huge revenue delta. Here we are by scanner, looking at the image reduction time across those various scanners. In graph form, you can see the average time savings on all these magnets was substantial. And with the new HD, we were having just a little bit less image quality satisfaction on our lower field magnets. We do have some upright opens. We have some open Hitachi Oasis units. The HD really has made a big difference on that. And I'll show you just a couple images. Larry showed you several already. How about by protocol? If you get more granular and we look at brain versus cervical, thoracic, lumbar, spine, these are the kind of numbers, average savings we were able to enjoy from deploying the SubtleMR on our initial rollout prior to getting the HD, which we are just rolling out. With SubtleHD, by the way, we are going to get incremental value, not only better images like we saw in the last segment, but also more time savings, which is going to translate into more dollars, top line dollars here. This is just adding additional scans with existing employees on the payroll. So all this is top line revenue that's coming in just by shortening these image acquisition times so substantially, as you saw. The non-fiscal benefits are substantial. We get better clarity with the HD. The quality of the images much sharper. It gives you more confidence when you're reading them. Using the whole suite, so you can use ALIGN when you're looking at an MS case, for example, and I look at several a day, it really does boost your confidence, because my neurologist says one new lesion when I'm treating somebody makes a difference. Even if all the other ones are the same, or even maybe some are regressing, you show me one or two new lesions, that's going to affect how I manage my patients. So this is not trivial in terms of image quality and patient outcome, having these tools to optimize your ability to read those scans. You can do it faster, and it's a lot easier at the end of a day if you've been looking at good images rather than the noisy ones, and some that are suboptimal. I mean, take a look at this. This is an axial flare, and you can see the clarity here, the gray-white matter junction. We've even got some phase artifact on the standard of care, or this is the original HD actually, or subtle MR. Look at the difference. So moving to the HD package really makes a difference in terms of image clarity. I would much rather read the image on the right, and it's additional time savings. Here's a cervical spine, same thing. If you're looking for intramedullary lesions, you want that clarity that the software provides. And if you're looking at the osseous structures, the degenerative findings, look at the difference in the clarity that we get. The osseous detail, soft tissue detail, all much better on the HD. Here's a lumbar spine, same thing. Looking at the conus medullaris here, cauda equina, the osseous structures, much better clarity utilizing the HD, and acquisition time has come down significantly compared with standard of care. Here's a standard image versus the SubtleHD, which is an incremental benefit over the SubtleMR, which did a significant improvement over the standard of care, in addition to time savings. And Larry and I did some of the earliest trials looking at these blinded. We looked at, I don't know how many hundred, Larry, but lots of these blinded, and scored them on multiple criteria. And that was on the initial product from Subtle. And here, just one more image. You can again see on these axial T1 weighted images, just the clarity of the soft tissue and osseous detail on the HD versus the comparison. So in terms of patient experience, they have less time in the scanner, less discomfort, increased satisfaction. It helps with scheduling because we have more room. Our backlog problems are being solved in those busy scanners. And we have some concentrated centers where there really is a backlog is a problem. And that's why I mentioned past model, when do we pull the trigger and buy a new magnet? Well, this helps push that down the road and save that capital expenditure for the fiscal year. What's the other benefit of less time in the scanner? Well, this has been shown to be a true factor in patient satisfaction. How long were they in the scanner? Now, notice that shortening your acquisition time benefits a couple others. Wait time after check-in. Techs are less likely to get behind when they have the faster scanner. And look at this one. Comfort during exam. Less time in the scanner, more comfort. So 3 of the 5 of these criteria that were shown on a formal study that was published were related to how long is that patient in the scanner. Not only is that better for the patient, but it's better for your center. Again, outpatient imaging, we rely on revenue from imaging. Some hospital chains can actually use radiology as a loss leader because inpatients and surgery patients are how they make their revenue. A radiology practice can't do that. So patients who are satisfied, it actually drives volume. And this has been shown in other published studies as well. So in summarizing the impact that it's had for us, you saw the numbers. I mean, the return on investment is significant, and it's at this point several million annually, still growing as we move it out to other scanners. It has extended a number of our legacy scanners with so many scanners across the country. It's not possible to keep all of them, within a three to 5 year age limit. The throughput, you saw what it did for us, 3. Now we're moving up to closer to 5 days per scanner, 5 patients per day, with improved quality of images. less time in the scanner. These patients are more satisfied, and it is really helping to drive our volumes and our top line revenue. I'd like to thank our chairman, Larry Tannenbaum, for inviting me to speak, and Subtle Imaging as well. And I especially like to thank you all for your attention this morning. We're going to move to our final speaker, Dr. Catherine Keller. She is CEO of Lake Medical in Central Florida. She has a private practice with a handful of centers, not as large a practice, but she is going to share with us her experience in growing their MR practice utilizing SubtleHD. Dr. Keller.
Hey, thanks, Blake and Larry. This has been a fantastic presentation so far. I completely agree with all the things that you said, and I'm going to tell you about a smaller private practice. We started with the subtle MR, and now we have the HD. So Lake Medical Imaging is in Central Florida. We have 6 imaging centers with 8 magnets ranging in vintage from 2011 to 22. There are 7 1.5s and 1 3T. We had several challenges that we needed to take care of because especially after COVID, we had a real big backlog and delays in scheduling. And most importantly, we needed to be able to get more patients in. We have an older patient population, 70% are 65 and older, and they have issues with limited mobility and require extra care and communication. And we needed to improve the quality on our legacy scanners where we needed to have better resolution. Some of the machines were slower, so that led to problems with more repeats due to motion artifact when the patient was in there for so long. So Subtle was absolutely the best solution for us because we had fantastic time savings. It was applicable across all our machines of various vintages and makers, all anatomy, 2D and 3D, and it has a pipeline of more products to come and was at a great value. So we were able to do this in a vendor agnostic manner across 3 different vendors and multiple software platforms. We had workflow optimization. We started with 2 techs per magnet and then went to 1 tech and 1 aide. We had excellent support from the very beginning from the product specialists there who helped us change our protocols, and then we were able to roll this out easily over our 6 sites. The first site we started at the end of 2020. It took us 3 to 4 weeks to implement that. And then we went site by site, magnet by magnet, because each location and each magnet, the workflow is slightly different, although we try to make it as uniform as possible. The subsequent sites were 2 to 3 weeks for rollout. So by the middle of the second quarter of 2021, we were at all sites, and that was fantastic. Look at the time savings we had with Subtle MR. It was about 40% overall for all different body parts. Really a big help for us. And it meant that we were able to see a tremendous ROI from the additional revenue we gained from saving time on tech overtime and from additional patient scanning. We were able to gain $2.1 million in revenue in the first year with that 40% time reduction. And as was already mentioned, we saved the money for buying another scanner. 41 patients a day across the 8 machines means that you don't have to buy another scanner. We also saved $900,000 on in-room upgrades. So that was a huge savings as well. So what we did is that we had both Subtle MR and SubtleHD increased our capacity and our image quality with its multiple features, more features than just with the OEM or with other vendors. It's vendor and software platform agnostic. We were able to increase revenue, increase patient referring doctor satisfaction, and improve image quality, which meant that as an outpatient imaging center that relies on referrals, just like Blake was saying, we have to be satisfactory for the referring doctors and the patients. And with better image quality, it means that the reads are easier and faster. With the elderly population, they were more satisfied, less problems with patient motion and pain. I was surprised at how much better the SubtleHD was compared to these fantastic results I had with SubtleMR. It was unanticipated. So now I'm going to show you some images. Here we have a 2022 magnet, and you can see that the SubtleHD improves the image quality. It looks as good as a 3T. Here you have on 2011 1.5 from the standard of care up to the HD. You have almost 75% time savings, and the resolution is fantastic, improved signal to noise ratio. Here's on a 3T from 2020. The image quality on this diffusion is much better, along with additional time savings. When we had standard of care before any SubtleMR, it took us almost 45 minutes on this 3T to do the entire prostate sequence, including contrast. Once we added MR, it was about 27 minutes. And now with the SubtleHD, we can do that in 16 minutes, and it's fantastic. Here on the 3T also, as seen before, a big time savings and increased signal to noise ratio. On the axial, again, you're not as much change in the resolution, but a tremendous time savings. How about on a body image? You can see that there is improved on the far right compared to the far left standard of care resolution, and you're saving time. But look at this with the breath holds. Instead of breath holds of 12 seconds, it's 8 seconds. So with 7 repeated breath holds, a patient who is in pain or older or has emphysema is much more able to maintain that short breath hold, and therefore you don't have troubles with needing to repeat the scans. You stay on schedule, patient's happy, tech's happy. Look at this. Here you have an older study, and with the axial C-spine, you can get improved scan time, and you can see the nerve roots better. This even works on the body imaging. You're getting an additional 50% time savings and improved image quality. Look at this with a 2014 magnet. Look at how much better you can see the internal structures on the marrow, and the quality of the image is vastly improved, saving times. This is our old scanner that is really poor image quality, so that we couldn't do a lot of neuro work on it, and it's had such long scan time. On this 2013 machine, you see on the standard of care, there's a lot of motion artifact on the far left that got cleaned up with a SubtleMR, but additional time savings and completely gone with the SubtleHD. So it goes from an unusable image that you would have to call the patient back for to a fantastic usable image. And with that kind of image quality, we didn't need to do an in-room upgrade, saving $900,000. We also were able to add back in doing MS cases on the brain and internal auditory canals, things like that. Really a fantastic. And here, same thing with improved image quality on the shoulder, time savings and saving the money of the in-room upgrade. Same here. And here is on a brain where we're doing this for pituitary post-contrast. Look at the improved resolution and the signal to noise ratio. You can really see the detail better. This is the same patient with a sagittal. Again, you're seeing fantastic image quality, unbelievable. And here now you can see the nerve roots that you couldn't see before at all. So compared to the SubtleMR, we saved about 40% time compared to standard of care. The SubtleHD gave us an additional 30% time savings. Unbelievable, along with that resolution. So we were doing across our 8 machines about 41 more patients a day with the MR. So that was about $2.1 million in increased revenue and overtime savings. By adding the HD, we get about an additional 2 patients a day on top of that. So that ends up being about $3.4 million. Now, for us right now with the Medicare population in 2025, the average reimbursement for an MRI is only $200, $250, depending upon what body part it is. So we have to do this to save the capital expense of in-room upgrades and new machines and have it at an affordable cost. So remember the 4 Ps that Larry talked about: pedigree, partnership, product and pipeline. Subtle has proved to be a company with fabulous integrity. They do what they say. You can count on them. They keep their promises, and they are aligned with our needs. The product is excellent. It has improved resolution and time savings at an affordable price. It has the pipeline for future products and what's coming along with what Dr. Tannenbaum showed you. They are not a one-trick pony, and they are a great partner. Subtle partnered with us to create a success initially when we had a tremendous backlog, and they have stuck with us since 2020 and now have presented this elite package, which is causing us to have improved revenue, improved capacity, and most importantly, better satisfaction from the referring doctors and the patients. We've had time returned to patient care with reduced waiting times for scheduling, reduced waiting times in office, and because of the time savings, there's actually some spare time for the techs to stay on schedule in case the patient shows up late, or there are those inevitable add-ons. You have to do it today. We can't wait till next week. Now we have time to do that. So no matter what, I would recommend this product to everyone without reservation. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Dr. Keller, and thank you, Dr. Tannenbaum and Dr. Johnson. We really appreciate you guys sharing your experience today. Dr. T, I noticed that you got a head start on answering some of those questions that we've received in the Q&A, so thank you for that. I'm not sure if everyone can see those answered questions, as they might have more, but I'll just go ahead and start knocking out some of these questions. Dr. Johnson, are you able to join us, or did we lose you? Always fun in a live webinar. Okay, we'll wait for Dr. Johnson to get back online, and we'll just we'll continue going here. One question that came up, Dr. Tannenbaum and Dr. Keller, I think both of you might be able to speak to this, and we hear it quite often, is, you know, how do I manage my staff if we use a solution like Subtle? How do I manage the increased volume and the tech burnout? Is that an issue, or how did you acknowledge that? Maybe start with Dr. Keller.
Sure. So actually having the increased volume meant that we were able to eliminate some of the overtime and evening weekend shifts, things like that, which was helpful because with the scarcity of MR techs, I can't get enough techs to work those extra shifts. So I was able to do the same volume that I would have done with evening and weekend shifts during the 9-hour day with the hour break for lunch. So that was one thing. And as far as the burnout, because it's less patient on the table time, there are more gaps in between patients for the techs to do their other things, the DICOMing, taking care of paperwork, being able to adjust in case a patient shows up late. So they have been very satisfied with this, and they don't feel stressed by it.
I think that was a great answer. I gave an answer in the chat, which I'm sure you all can see, but I think it's very similar to what you just heard. But I can tell you that one of the things that Kathy didn't address is the technologists that I've had the pleasure of working with and working side by side with during my 35-year career. I've always taken great pride in creating great studies, right? And I've always been stressed and burnt out by difficult circumstances and poor studies. So I can tell you that across the board, there is genuine glee when you knock out a study. You don't have to repeat it because the scan time was long. There's a better patient experience, so they're not complaining about, you know, inconvenience and delay. I think it's a win. Yeah, in theory, more work feels like burnout, but, you know, better work, smoother work, fewer repeats turns into a circumstance that really does increase both the patient experience, as Dr. Johnson pointed out, but also the experience and job satisfaction for the operator.
Dr. Johnson, you're on mute. We want to hear you.
It's really an excellent question because you just heard it's a multifaceted answer. You have the potential, if you drive the techs too hard, to add to burnout, which none of us can afford today because of the tech shortage. Larry's points really hits the mark, because that is exactly what happened to our techs, is that they love seeing those better images. And then just keep in mind, you don't have to use all that time savings to cram in patients stacked on top of another. You can do what Dr. Keller said, and you can leave a little buffer there for the techs to not get so stressed in being rushed. Another thing we did is we started to hire tech assistants, so that the technologists are operating at the top of their license. They're doing what techs are trained to do, and a lot of the logistics involved in patient throughput, getting the patient, getting them ready, et cetera, can be done by someone who's not a tech.
That's
So
right.
it can effectively expand your tech force. It's just one more tool available to help minimize that. But I agree with both of the other speakers that really there's multiple components to the answer to that.
Yeah, thank you. Those are great feedback. Here's another one we get quite often. As you know, when you're first to market for something, there's always going to be a Me Too product coming out, or as Dr. Keller put it, a one-trick pony. We've got a couple of questions about how SubtleElite or SubtleHD compares to Swift MR, the AIR's medical solution. I think, Dr. Johnson, you might be suited to answer that. I believe you maybe evaluated both in your practice.
Yeah, short time on the HD, the subtle on the higher field strength, the subtle MR we used, but the Swift came in on the lower field strength. It came into organization because the subtle MR wasn't doing as good a job as the Swift on the lower field strength. Well, now with the HD, that's changed, and in fact, when we rolled out HD, which we just started to do, as I mentioned, my colleague who was working with this on me with me on the AI tools that we're deploying said to me, I asked him how it's going when they rolled it out, because I wasn't in town the day that they installed it, and he said, "I'm having a good day." And later I talked to our head of procurement, who said, "Dr. Gilbert said he's having a good day." I like that when radiologists are happy with the image quality. So he was very happy, as was our head of procurement, who looks at magnets and replacing them and deals with the fact that we do have a lot of legacy scanners. So so we're very happy with what the HD is going to do, because there was a little bit of a shortfall on the low field that I think this has convinced me and my colleagues. Go ahead, Larry, that it's taken care of. Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I wanted to get the Anna's attention so that I could follow. I'm going to indirectly address your question. When you guys go to market, Subtle and their competition, in this case, I believe the company's name is AIRS for Swift MR. It's very fashionable to make claims as to how much faster your scans go. As I tried to point out, the baseline is variable across practices and across protocols. When I tried to emphasize that the protocols that I assisted in designing started out efficient. As a matter of fact, when I was back in New Jersey, anybody who remembers running into me when I was there, we were certified the most efficient site in the United States. Not one of the most efficient sites, but the most efficient site. So I brought that philosophy to our RadNet scans, and a 50% savings over the fastest scan in the United States is a pretty big number. On the other hand, forgetting that bit of nonsense, your scan time speed comes from two things, and it's largely, there are two big components. One is the scanner. Okay, some scanners that can push, every scanner can reduce the next down to minimum. Okay, that's simple and universal across the board. The scanners that can make a faster scan, ugly or not, are the ones that can push the parallel imaging factor harder, right? Some of the guys who corresponded in the chat were talking about pushing parallel imaging. Parallel imaging gives you speed at the expense of SNR. Great, max that out to the absolute limit of the system, okay, and then come back to your DLR provider, the companies like Subtle Medical, and come back to SubtleHD and let it correct the signal to noise for you. So first of all, the time comparisons are a bit artificial. Two, the acceleration will vary by protocol you use and scanner you use, because how bad you can create an ugly image is really the question. And then you come back to companies like Subtle and say, correct this image. I've created something as fast as I can. Now turn it back into something better than the standard of care. And you've seen how it has enormous capability to compensate for noise, to completely denoise, and even more importantly, can deliver images with less artifact, better patient satisfaction. And as I've showed over and over again with HD, higher spatial resolution with fewer artifacts. It's very exciting and very impactful.
Thank you, Dr. Tannenbaum. Yeah, I think from the Subtle perspective, again, this is why we focus on continuous innovation, because we take feedback from our customers like you, and we take that and we use that and build new, bigger, and better products like SubtleHD. And also we build solutions with incremental value. So for example, Subtle Elite is a suite of solutions. No longer can you compare Subtle MR and Swift like head to head. Now you're going to be comparing one product to a suite of solutions that have now, used better technology and more and better data and perform more things for you for incremental value. So it's not really even a head to head. And let's assume that the price is similar or competitive. Which one are you going to go with at the end of the day? But I'm getting a lot of questions about commercial availability. So if you have specific questions about SubtleHD being available in your specific country, please just reach out to us at sales@subtlemedical.com or myself, Anna, at subtlemedical.com, and we'd be happy to connect you with the appropriate distributor or rep in your area. And that involves any type of questions around pricing. Unfortunately, we have a ton of more questions, but we are over time already. So I just want to take the time to thank Dr. Tannenbaum, Dr. Keller, and Dr. Johnson for joining us today. This is a really insightful webinar, and we really appreciate you guys and your support for the company and your ability to always let us get in there and test things with you and test things at your site before rolling them out to a wider scale. We really appreciate the partnership with you all, and we appreciate everyone for taking the time to join us today. We'll follow up with the recording, and we'll also put the recording on our website in case you'd like to see it in the future. And with that, I think we'll wrap it up and we'll say goodbye.